Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Tournament Podcast. Mike, as always, joined by my brothers Tom and Marty. And this morning, we're going to be going back to the NBA. I'm trying to remember what our most recent topic was, but we'll be either going back to or sticking with the NBA this week. And we're going to be breaking down the 8 greatest centers in NBA history. And for this one, I kind of had an idea, being an NBA fan, of what the top 8 should be. And I also went out, looked at quite a few sources online, and they all seem to back up, what I was expecting to see. So luckily, these seem to be more or less the universal picks for the top 8. So we'll get going here. But before we do that, just a reminder, please like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you think, as always. If you like the topic, if you agree, disagree, just let us know what you think, and we appreciate it. We've already done the brackets here, randomly generated the brackets already. Tom and Marty have copies of those. So we are ready to get going. I will break the brackets down, though, for those of you watching or listening. Again, we're doing the 8 greatest centers in NBA history. We have, actually, I'll just kind of go down without spoiling what the brackets are. I'll just kind of randomly name guys off here. We have the likes of Shaquille O'Neal, Wilt Chamberlain, Patrick Ewing, Hakeem Olajuwon, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, David Robinson, and 8th but not least, who I was kind of expecting to be more of a dark horse, but again, all the sources I looked at, he was included in that top 8, is Moses Malone, a name that hopefully everybody's familiar with, but he's probably out of these 8 guys, I'd say he's probably the least, the least well known, I guess I would say. So, but that is the 8 guys we're going to be going with today. And as randomly generated here, our number one or our first matchup will be Shaquille O'Neal going against Bill Russell. So right out of the gate, and I just named off the 8 guys. Obviously, this is going to be a tough one. All 8 of these gentlemen are superstars, Hall of Famers. So it's going to be a tough one. But we are starting out with Shaq against Bill Russell. Let's see. We will let Marty kick this one off. Marty, what do you think, Shaq or Bill Russell?
Wow. Well, these are the matchups. I've said it before when we've done, NBA and I think NFL topics. I really enjoy these generational, matchups because the difference in style and gameplay from when Bill Russell was playing, in the 50s and 60s compared to Shaquille O'Neal in the more current generation, it's just so interesting. The game is so different from then. It's interesting because I think we all share as brothers kind of the same mindset about Shaquille O'Neal. He is on this list, I would say, the least skilled player of everyone listed, but the most dominant. I mean, his size, his strength, no one could keep him out of the post. I mean, you could foul him and expose one of his weaknesses, the free throw shooting, but yeah, no one could stop Shaq.
And that's why when I initially thought of this concept, my thought was, like I said, the best, more so the best all around, because if it was most dominant, Shaq would presumably be number 1, and then I guess you'd probably have to go with Wilt. So I thought it would be, better to go with like maybe the best all around versus most dominant. That way it leaves it a little more open.
Well, and I will say a lot of people I know did not like the way Shaquille played, and they would say, and it's true. It was a fine line between offensive fouls every play because he was so big and strong. But to me, Shaq probably was the last true center in the NBA. I mean, there's a few good ones now, but a lot of these guys aren't true centers in the sense of the word, the way they play and, post dominated, things like that. But with me, I mean, Bill Russell obviously is an all time, great, but statistically, I don't think he stacks up with, most of the other centers here. But again, that's because the generational gap. I know Bill Russell was a defensive beast too. I think he was one of the few people that could even, kind of stop or contain. Was it Wilt? Did he go against Wilt?
I believe so.
His time, and I think Wilt had mentioned he was the one that could handle him. But with this one, I hate doing it because I'm definitely more old school. But I mean, if you look at the overall stats, Bill Russell averaged 15 points a game, 22 rebounds. Shaq averaged 23.7 points and basically 11 rebounds. I'm going to go with Shaq on this one. And again, it's just based on pure dominance, physical dominance. Obviously, no disrespect to Bill Russell, but I have to go with Shaq.
All right. Tommy, if you'd like to go ahead and go second.
I'll try to keep my answer somewhat brief. And before I go into it, though, I will mention that we have done at least the last two NBA podcasts that we've done. We did the greatest point guards of all time. And then before that, the greatest shooting guards. And they were reverse tournaments. So we start with nothing and we kind of build a tournament from the ground up. And then we rank the players from there. So if you like this NBA content, be sure to check out those videos. I'll try to remember to put links in the description to both of those. But yeah, I guess we're all going to have our own kind of criteria to decide these matchups. I'll just think of, in their primes, battling against each other, offensively and defensively, and or if I had a team, was starting a team and I could get one of these guys in their prime, who would I want? And I think really in this one, it's just going to go down to, you got the ultimate champion against the ultimate dominant player. But Bill Russell, I guess, played at 6'10", 220. Shaq 7'1", 325. Just the size. I mean, I just don't know what Bill would do. I mean, I know he was able to hold Wilt in check, to some regard. But again, Wilt wasn't 7'1", 325. I mean, he's just an anomaly. Shaq is. So I'm going to go with Shaquille O'Neal in this matchup too. And I hate it because Bill Russell seems like the best guy in the world. But yeah, well, and Shaq seems like a very nice guy too. Don't get me wrong, but Bill just seems so super nice and such a good person. But I'm going to go with Shaq.
And Bill's laugh is infectious.
Oh, it is. Yep.
All right. And actually, before I make my pick here, it's a nice spot to remind everybody that we do each have a veto. So even though Shaq so far is up 2-0, majority says Shaq will move on no matter what I say. But because we do have our veto, we each get a veto. That's one veto a week for each of us. If I decide that Bill Russell should move on, even though Tom and Marty both picked Shaq, I can use my veto to move Bill Russell on. And then, of course, if they feel strongly enough about Shaq, they can use one of their vetoes to, in turn, move Shaq on, or they can save it for later, as can I. So we all come with a veto that we can use to move somebody on if we see fit. But I will not be using mine in this first matchup because I agree. Bill Russell, obviously the numbers were there. The points were, obviously a lot less than everybody else in this tournament this week. And part of that might be because those teams that Bill were on were so stacked. Those Celtics teams that won, what was it, 11 rings, I believe he has. So those teams were so stacked. Yeah, that 22 rebounds was impressive. But yeah, Shaq all around. And even the young Shaq, I know a lot of people seem to remember the Lakers Shaq, where he was just massive and would dominate people physically, knock them over. And then the Haka Shaq, came into play and all that. But I also remember Shaq, of course, in Orlando, those first several years where he was a lot thinner. He could run the floor, he could handle the ball, he could pass. So even, young Shaq like that was still on a Hall of Fame trajectory. So yeah, Shaq, before he even was the dominant player that a lot of people know him as, was still, one of the top centers in the league. He was a beast. So yeah, I was never a huge fan of Shaq as a player. Like Tom said, both guys seem like great guys. Shaquille is hilarious. So I have nothing against him personally, but yeah, as a player, he was never my favorite. But yeah, he was just so dominant, and yeah, you have to go with Shaq, unfortunately. So all due respect to Bill Russell, but Shaq is moving on with a 3-0 sweep to move on to the semifinals. In our second matchup here this week, we have the all-time leader in scoring in NBA history, at least right now, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, going up against the guy that I said I felt was kind of the dark horse, even though he was, like I said, he's a Hall of Famer, had a heck of a career, but he's, to a lot of NBA fans, unless you're a hardcore fan, he might be the name on this list that you're least familiar with, and that is Moses Malone. So we have Kareem against Moses, and let's see, Tom, if you'd like to go ahead and kick this one off for us.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Again, I'm just starting off with size here. Kareem 7'2", 225. Moses Malone, actually an undersized center, 6'10", 215. Moses averaged 20 points a game and 12 boards. Kareem was 24 points a game and 11 boards. And almost 4 assists per game for Kareem. Pretty impressive. But again, trying to keep my answer somewhat brief. Obviously Kareem is, like, in some regards, the greatest player to ever play. I don't agree with that. I think it's probably Michael and then LeBron a close second. But I just don't know how you wouldn't take Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in this matchup. No offense to Moses, whose stat line is crazy good. Obviously, another Hall of Fame player. I assume everybody on this list is going to be a Hall of Fame player, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was just something special. He seemed like he was a great leader, and obviously that sky hook. It's literally, it's, I guess, maybe one of the few unstoppable shots where, like, you can't stop it. You couldn't. There's no way it could be blocked, and he had that thing down. Talk about a lost art. Nobody does that. I don't think anybody really did it. Even towards the end of his career in the 80s, and that there wasn't anybody that has carried it on, and we've ever really seen it again. But yeah, just the overall ability, the dominant low post skills, the leadership. I'm going to go with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
All right. I'll go ahead and go second this time around. And to alleviate some of the suspense, I agree. I'm just kind of looking at Moses Malone's stats here. And yeah, Moses was a heck of a ball player, a 3-time league MVP, finals MVP. He was an all-star, 12 times, multi-time All-NBA selection, defensive, team selection. So Moses did have a heck of a career, but yeah, in most cases, the numbers are going to pale in comparison to to what Kareem did. I mean, almost 25 a game, 11 boards, almost 4 assists a game. I mean, 6-time MVP, was finals MVP multiple times. 19-time All-Star. My goodness. He was on 15 All-NBA teams, over 10 defensive team selections. He was scoring champion, block champion. There's pretty much nothing Kareem didn't do, which it's funny. Everything that he accomplished, I don't know if Kareem's ever really been talked about as being the GOAT. Even before Michael, I don't know if Kareem was kind of discussed as being the GOAT. But yeah, I mean, I love Moses, but it's hard not to pick Kareem in this case. As good as Moses was and as impressive as his numbers were, one of the few guys on this list that actually would probably dwarf the numbers that Moses had overall with the selections and the MVPs and all that is Kareem. So that tells you right there, that's where the matchups do matter on the tournament podcast. Because of that, Kareem gets my vote. Marty, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you guys, you covered everything. I mean, Moses Malone to me I think he's probably grossly underrated, as far as a name that people talk about. I mean, the longevity that he had in his career, but, not just the longevity, the productivity with that too. I mean, you guys talked about all his accolades and, a finals MVP, everything like that. But like you said, tournament podcast, matchups are everything. He's going against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Man, it's hard to pick against Kareem just with his dominance also for a long period of time. I don't want to forget to say that, but, again, just based on the resume, the number of, MVPs, so impressive. I think you have to go with Kareem.
All right. And even when you look, I mean, Kareem played into his early 40s, was still putting up. I mean, his last season, he averaged just over 10 a game, but the year before that, almost 15 a game. Before that, 18 a game for a guy that was, 40 plus. So, Kareem was a magical talent and deserving. But again, all due respect to Moses. And that's why I said he was probably the most underappreciated guy on this list, just because of all the rest of the names included. So, but yep, lots of love and respect for Moses. But Kareem is moving on to face Shaq in the semifinals. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. Next up here, we have Wilt Chamberlain going up against Patrick Ewing. And let's see, I will go ahead and kick this one off. I'm looking at the stats here. I mean, I pretty much know what Wilt did. I mean, oh, wow. Over 30 points a game, basically 23 rebounds a game, and 4.5 assists a game. And if I'm not mistaken, Wilt may be to this day the only center to ever lead the league in assists. But my goodness, I mean, again, 4-time MVP. He's been a finals MVP, multiple all-star and all NBA selections, defensive team selections. But yeah, 30 points, 23 rebounds, and over 4 assists a game. Let's see here. On the flip side, Patrick Ewing, I believe, averaged just over 20, but actually exactly 21. My apologies. 21 points a game, 9.8 rebounds, rather. So under 10 rebounds and under 2 assists a game, which are still impressive numbers. 21 points, basically 10 rebounds. I mean, that's a heck of a career. Again, a lot of all-star and NBA selections, all NBA and all defensive team selections. So Patrick Ewing had a heck of a career, but I mean, the 30 points, 23 rebounds, 4.5 assists. I mean, Wilt was just so dominant. Part of that, of course, was the era that he played in. The guys weren't as big and as strong as they were, into the 80s, 90s, and now. So, you don't know what those numbers would look like for any of these guys if they were playing now. But all you have to do is go off of, the numbers that he put up at the time. And those numbers are pretty much unmatched by anybody. So for me, you have to go Wilt over Patrick Ewing. And again, I love Patrick Ewing, and he's one of the best all-around centers of all time. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be Wilt for me. Marty, if you want to go second here, what do you think, Wilt or Patrick Ewing?
Yeah, this again would be another one of those like generational battles, obviously. Excuse me, by the way, I've been fighting, bronchitis.
I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that.
So that's why I sound the way I do and have a little bit of coughing and hacking. So my apologies. Wilt Chamberlain was just, he's up there with Shaq as far as the most dominant of all time. I mean, his stats are gaudy. He just, excuse me, I know for one stretch of like 2 seasons, he averaged just under 50 points a game. Absolute insanity. Patrick Ewing, to me, is arguably the best shooting center of all time. I mean, he had a mid-range jumper that just, wow, almost couldn't be stopped. Patrick Ewing was phenomenal. What a competitor he was. But when you're looking at, these stats, the 30 points a game compared to 21 for Patrick, the all NBA team, 10 compared to 7. I mean, the numbers are so heavily stacked in Wilt's, favor. And again, matchups are everything. It's so difficult for me to think, I'd pick many people over Patrick Ewing. He was that good. But I do have to go with Wilt on this one. Just Wilt was so dominant. It's hard to go against him.
Yeah, like I said, again, matchups are everything. If you had Patrick against somebody like David Robinson, their stats are, a little bit more matched up evenly. So who knows? Patrick may have moved on in this case or in that case. But yeah, like I said, Wilt's stats, and just to throw it out there, Wilt did in 61-62 with Philadelphia, averaged 50.4 points a game and 25.7 rebounds. 50 points and 25 rebounds. But wow, those numbers are impressive, but are they impressive to Tom? He can use his veto if he would like to move on, Patrick.
Yeah, now, some of these guys you do have to, and I try not to penalize them like Shaq. I'm not going to penalize him for being big because that was him. And he played to his strengths, which of course he should have done, and turned it into a Hall of Fame career. But I looked up quickly, and this is nowadays, roughly speaking, and I'm sure this has changed, it was a little bit ago here, but about 15% of all men in the United States of America currently are over 6 foot or 6 feet or over. Only 15% of all men. So you can imagine each generation you go back, that number is going to shrink 13, 12, 11, 10, etc. Wilt Chamberlain played at a time where, he was 7'1", 275. There was nobody even close. And if there was some anomaly that was in the NBA, some other team had a center, they certainly weren't as skilled as Wilt Chamberlain at that, even close to that size. Patrick played in an era where it was almost the boom of the center. Every team had a high caliber center pretty much that he had to go against every night, where Wilt was able to just use his size and sheer dominance to get, 30 points a game and 20 rebounds. However, with that being said, again, I'm not going to penalize him. And again, if they're in their primes and they're matched up against each other, I'm not saying that Wilt wouldn't still be able to score and have a very impressive stat line against Patrick Ewing. I think it's just a case of dominance here, where Patrick, I think Marty mentioned, I think was the better overall skill set. Wilt Chamberlain, again, just so big. And I mean, we're talking centers, just so big and strong in that position. Now, the only thing I will say against Wilt is he had a better field goal percentage for his career than he did a free throw percentage, which you just can't do. But other than that, what a player. So I'm going to go with Wilt Chamberlain as well.
Nice. And yeah, as I was looking at Wilt's stats, something else that, man, like most guys, as his career went on, his numbers slowly went down. Again, his third year averaged 50 points a game, whereas his final year in 72-73, he averaged just over 13 a game. However, his field goal percentage that last season, I don't know how he clearly didn't take a lot of shots or as many. He averaged 13 points a game on a field goal percentage of 72%.
Yeah.
So he obviously just didn't he wasn't as active. I don't know if he wasn't as active around the basket or just didn't put up as many shots, but 72%. And that was in a full 82 game season, it looks like. So, woo. Yeah, Wilt is moving on, deservedly so. And, I keep saying it, all due respect to Patrick, but yeah, with just going against Wilt, it's rough. All right, so our last matchup here in the first round then comes down to, wow, and this is going to be a lot tougher because these numbers look so far like they're going to be very similar. Two guys from the same era. Hakeem Olajuwon, the Dream, against the Admiral, David Robinson. And unfortunately, I've got myself here going first on this one. Oh, man, let me take a look at the stats here. So just throw it out. Hakeem's points per game is 21.8, 11.1 rebounds. So basically 22 points, 11 rebounds, and 2.5 assists, compared to David Robinson's 21.1 points. So almost identical there. 10.6 rebounds. So basically 11 rebounds, which is what Hakeem averaged, and exactly the same number of assists per game, 2.5. The steals, 1.7 for Hakeem to 1.4 for David. So, I mean, the numbers for these guys, both men average 3 blocks a game. So the numbers are pretty much identical. Wow. Both men, again, were MVPs. Season MVPs. Hakeem also a finals MVP. David didn't win that. That presumably went to Tim Duncan then. Both men were multi-time All-Stars, Defensive Player of the Year, teamers. I think both men actually won the Defensive Player of the Year award. Yep. So, man, both men, impressive. Both have 2 championships. Oh, goodness gracious. This one's so hard. Whew, but I think for me, again, the stats are just so, both men's stats are so equal. It's really hard to differentiate the two. So I'm just going to go on the fact that Hakeem won his 2 titles, even though I know a lot of people say that he won his, the 2 years that Michael didn't feel like winning them. Michael took off 2 years. He let Hakeem win them, but you do hear that from some people. But Hakeem still won them. David won them, but it was in those later years where Tim Duncan was on the team, and at that point, David was more the supporting character to Duncan. So unfortunately, that's because the stats and the careers are so similar. I'm just going to go with Hakeem just because of the fact that, yeah, it was more Tim Duncan's team at that point, where when Hakeem won them, Hakeem was still the man. All due respect to Kenny Smith and Sam Cassell, but Hakeem was clearly the man on those teams still. So, by the slightest of margins, of course, I'm going with Hakeem to move on. Marty, what are you gonna do? Goodness.
Yeah, amazing matchup here. To the best of all time. Obviously, that's why they're in the tournament here. Two guys that defense, which I love. Good defense. Two amazing defenders. David Robinson was agile and strong and fast. So was Hakeem. I feel like anything you say about David Robinson, great defender or everything like that, so is Hakeem. But I think there are a few things that Hakeem had that no center in the NBA had. His footwork, the moves underneath were just, the dream shake and all his little, fakes and pumps were just incredible with his footwork. To me, Hakeem Olajuwon just transformed that center position from not only someone who was big and strong. Hakeem maybe wasn't as thick as the others, but he was strong. But Hakeem was so agile and just so skilled underneath with his moves. To me, I have to definitely go with Hakeem on this one.
All right. Tom?
All right. Yeah, this this was a tough matchup. It's not a tough matchup for me at all.
Oh, no.
As soon as I saw it, I already knew who my pick was.
Poor Hakeem.
Now, interestingly enough, when you look at the stat line, it is crazy. And if you go to Basketball Reference and you pull up a player, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a little box to compare. So you can type in another player's name and hit compare, and it has all their stats stacked. And my God, they are mirror images. Literally mirror images and everything: steals, assists, points, rebounds, free throws, every category. Now, I will say that Hakeem Olajuwon was a 20% 3-point shooter for his career.
Nice.
And David Robinson, though, was 25% from threes. So, and they both took a decent amount of 3-point shots. So that's an interesting little sidebar. But yeah, Hakeem Olajuwon was special. Obviously, at least in my opinion, I say obviously, in my opinion, the greatest offensive center that there's ever been. I guess maybe number two in terms of a skill set would be Kareem in my book, but Hakeem Olajuwon is just something special. Again, without dragging this on, my pick is Hakeem Olajuwon. So why not just say it and move on? So that's all right.
So Hakeem moves on. So the semifinals are set. We have Shaq going up against Kareem and Wilt going up against Hakeem. So we got three Lakers and one Houston Rocket in the semifinals here. But before we get going, again, if you made it this far, please give us a like, share, subscribe, comment, look us up on social media. Just let us know what you think. We appreciate the comments and the feedback. And thank you. All right. So, Marty, if you would like to go ahead and kick off the semifinals here, Shaquille O'Neal v. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Wow. This is a really, really tough one. And again, the ones that I like with the big generational gap. I don't think there's any question that both of these guys were the most dominant centers of their generation. So that, makes it interesting. Kareem, I would think obviously is more skilled overall with what he could do. And Tom mentioned earlier, the sky hook. Basically he was just jumping and throwing the ball down into the net, but an amazing shot, unstoppable to beat the band. Both guys so dominant, both guys, several championships. I think Kareem has a couple more. Man, this is This is a tough one to me. It's both were so dominant, but I think when you look at, the overall package of what they could do, Kareem is definitely, I think, the more skilled without question. So, their overall stats are pretty darn similar too. So I'm just going to go with on this one, the most skilled player of these two, without question, Kareem. And I think Kareem also, as far as the longevity, was more productive later in his career. So I'm going to go with it. It's tough, but I'm going with Kareem on this one.
Nice. Let's see, Tom, if you'd like to go ahead and go second on this one.
Yeah, and I'll be quick as I've been trying to be here. I agree with Marty. I just think the skill set with Kareem, he's just a better all around player. So when you get especially to the semifinals here, these guys are all just the greatest of the great. You got to find some differentiating factor. And yeah, with him, it's just the overall skill set. And like I said, the leadership too. He was a true team player, like a captain. And I think all the players looked up to him and loved playing with him. So, he averaged almost 4 assists a game for his career. Shaq surprisingly averaged 2.5, which I was surprised it was even 1, but God bless him. But yeah, I just think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar again in that rarefied air of a special player. And yeah, without rambling on, I'm going to go with Marty and pick Kareem as well.
All right, nice. And it is hard to go against Shaq, but I do agree. I mean, even though, Shaq is, again, like we've said, the most dominant player probably to ever play the game. Yeah, I mean, Kareem still is, he put up more points, pulled down basically the same number of boards. It was 10.9 for Shaq to 11.2 for Kareem, just a little bit over there. The free throw percentage tells you a lot there. Shaq's career percentage was 52%, Kareem 72%, which doesn't sound too bad for a center, a position where they're usually not the best at the line. But yeah, and again, like you guys said as well, the production in those later years, Kareem again was still putting up, roughly 15 points a game when he was in his 40s. Shaq, on the other hand, was, still in his late 30s, but still in his 30s, putting up, 9, I think his last season, 12 before that. So Kareem was a little more productive for a little bit longer. And so I'm going with Kareem as well. So Kareem is moving on to face the winner of our second semifinal matchup, Wilt Chamberlain against Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. And Tom, I will let you take this one first.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go with pretty much the same rundown I did in Hakeem's last matchup. He's just again a special talent, something that we'll probably never see again. And Wilt, I mean, obviously we've seen guys that big and that dominant. He's a rare bird as well. Don't get me wrong, but and really we've only seen one, which was Shaquille O'Neal. But he certainly used his size to his advantage. Where again, as I talked about Patrick Ewing, and they were, in the same era, him, Hakeem Olajuwon, and so many other great centers having to battle each other. And he was just an unstoppable force offensively. People forget how good Hakeem was defensively. He was, good on the boards. So in this matchup, I'm going to go with the newer generation guy, which I typically skew older generation as well, but I just think Hakeem Olajuwon is something different that I'm lucky that I was able to grow up watching him play. So Hakeem Olajuwon for me.
Nice.
And a slight edge, let me say. Slight edge, because, I mean, obviously, Wilt is one of the greatest ever.
Yep, and I'll go second here. Man, again, both guys had amazing careers. Oh, goodness. It's just for the first time in this tournament, I think I'm going to create a little bit of suspense for the listeners or viewers.
Don't you do it.
And I'm going to go with Wilt. And that's hard to do because I love Hakeem. I've always been a fan of Hakeem when I was a kid. Followed him all the way up until the last season when he was with the Toronto Raptors. So yeah, I love Hakeem, and Hakeem is very deserving of being a top 5 center in the history of the league. Just an amazing career, but it is just so hard to overlook those stats that Wilt put up. The 30, 23, and over 4 assists. And again, a lot of that was, like I said, earlier, he wasn't playing against the size of guys that were in the league by the time Hakeem was playing. Guys, were bigger, stronger, just like they're bigger and stronger now than they were 20, 30 years ago when Hakeem was in his prime. So, yeah, it was a different time, but I also don't want to fault Wilt for that because he was out there doing what he could against the competition that he was going up against. So, yeah, those numbers are, for me, just so hard to overlook. I got to go with Wilt. Create a tough one here for Marty, a tiebreaker. Marty, what's it going to be?
Well, I'll tell you this. I agree with one of you guys, and I don't agree with the other. I'm going to throw that out there. Well, I mean, again, our tagline for the tournament podcast, matchups are everything. I can just tell you that Hakeem Olajuwon, like Tom said, so special. Probably will never see a center with that skill set, with those type of moves. Hakeem Olajuwon was just, I can't say enough about him.
Yeah.
However,
what's the next matchup?
However, he's going against Wilt Chamberlain, who averaged for his career 30 points a game and basically 23 rebounds. Gosh almighty. I mean, this is tough, but its matchups are everything. I can't believe I would ever say this and not go with Hakeem, but I agree with Mike. I'm going with Wilt on this one. Now, Tom is disturbed, you can see. Let's see what he does with this.
And again, like we mentioned earlier, we do have our vetoes. So even though Marty and I both picked Wilt, since Tom has the veto in his back pocket, he can use that to veto us and move Hakeem Olajuwon on.
Yeah, I am extremely disturbed.
I can tell. He's upset, guys.
And the parts of my body are itching right now just from the stress of what you guys are saying. So I am going to go ahead and use my veto.
Oh, wow.
I'm moving Hakeem Olajuwon unless one of you guys
he almost
want to use your veto to veto my veto. Yeah, I'm going to use it, and I'm going to move Hakeem Olajuwon on because that's how strongly I feel. The only thing with Wilt I'll say is that it'd be like if I went, up and on the 3rd grade team, and I was the center on the opposing team. I'm going to get 30 points and 20 rebounds a game against 3rd graders because I'm so much bigger. And I think that was a lot of what the dominance was for Wilt. But
you're penalizing Wilt.
But and I'd say it still doesn't detract because he could have been that big and averaged 10 points and 5 rebounds, but he didn't. He was dominant. But I just think Hakeem Olajuwon was on a different. He's just special, in my opinion. And
nice.
Very disappointed with you two.
I guess it's a good thing Marty and I both have a veto as well. Marty, what are you gonna do?
Well, I mean, I understand what Tom's saying, the generational difference in the size and all that. But I mean, Hakeem was 7 feet, 255. So, I mean, he was big even by the standards of the NBA during that time. It's a shame that Tom may be, I don't know, underscoring Wilt because of that, but I can't use my veto against either of these guys. So
did.
If Tom did, did he disrespect Wilt? You guys tell us in the comments, but I'm not going to use my veto against a superstar like that.
And I agree. I do, well, of course, feel Wilt should have moved on. But the one thing I will say in Hakeem's favor is at least when Hakeem played, he was going up against the likes of Patrick Ewing and David Robinson. And Wilt, on the other hand, was, matched up against the other guy on that other team that wasn't named Bill Russell. So, yeah, I mean, obviously there were, and I'm sure there were plenty of big time centers like Wes Unseld, and there were other centers at that time, but yeah, nothing like there was during the 80s and 90s. And yeah, Kareem. I mean, there were, every team at that point, Mark Eaton, there was a lot of big time centers. And so that is the one thing I will say that Hakeem's, was dominant when it was the era was very, all these teams had big time centers. Wilt was in the era where they didn't have as many centers of that caliber, but yeah, I feel bad holding that against him. It's not his fault, but yeah, like Marty said, I don't want to use a veto against either one of them. Hakeem is a beast and does deserve to move on.
Yep.
He just ran into the buzzsaw that was Wilt and somehow moved past him. So
he did. It was the dream shake.
I can't tell if Tom's being disrespectful.
Well,
still
twisted his ankle and he fell.
may go back and use my veto now just out of spite. No, we will not use it. So in our matchup here, wow, in the finals, we're gonna have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar against Hakeem Olajuwon. Wow. Let's see. I guess I will go ahead and take this one first. Man, I'm doing a comparison here because again, both guys are, the more or less the same time frame. I know, Kareem, of course, was in the 70s and 80s. Hakeem, 80s all the way up to 2002. Same general era. Just looking at the stats here, Kareem put up more points a game. They basically pulled down the same number of boards a game. Kareem averaged 1 assist more per game than Hakeem. Let's see, at the line, Kareem was a little bit better, 72% to 71, so almost identical. So, both guys, again, had very similar stats. So in this case, I'll go down again to the longevity where Kareem was putting up, 15 a game when he was, 40, 41 years old. At the end of Hakeem's career, when he was, 38, 39, he dipped down to, 10, 11 points. Last season, he was putting up 7 points a game. And then you also, of course, have just all the accolades that Kareem had, not just the titles, but the MVPs and the scoring titles and the all-star selections and everything. Just, outside of basically Wilt, Kareem's stats are going to dwarf pretty much everybody else in this tournament. The stats, the accolades, everything is in Kareem's favor. So for my pick is the greatest center of all time, I'm going to go with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Marty, what do you say?
Wow, this matchup. I mean, this is why it's the tournament podcast and why you guys are watching / listening. We take these tough topics and we take them to task. And this is a tough one here. I think this is a great finals matchup. Would it have been better if it was like Kareem versus Wilt? Tell us in the comments. But This is a tough matchup. Man, like Mike said, longevity, I think, kind of plays, big role in here. Hakeem played a total of 1,238 games. Kareem played 1,560 games. Kareem's stats pretty much on every stat line you look at are better, except slightly less blocks a game. Tremendous matchup here. But I mean, I think by the slightest of margins, I've got to go with Kareem.
Nice.
Well, then should I even open my mouth then? Because I used my veto. So that means in this situation, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the winner of this tournament. However, just to continue on with what I started, I'm going to go with Hakeem Olajuwon in this matchup. Just pretty much just for the offensive capabilities. I just think he was special offensively. I mean, like I don't even know what, like a small forward or something in a center's body, and Kareem obviously with the sky hook was something that was an absolute dominant move. And I brought that up a few times. My God, he had a lot more than that. But I mean, I think we could probably agree that the top three of all time, however you want to shuffle them, are Kareem, Hakeem, and Wilt. But I'm going to go ahead and still say that it's Hakeem in my book. And it doesn't matter, though, because I don't have a veto, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the end of it.
Real bad.
Yep. All right.
Yes.
So that means at least in our opinion, well, two of us, the greatest center of all time is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You can argue if number two is Hakeem or Wilt. I think we know, but please let us know in the comments section. All right. Well, again, if you got to the end of this, we hope you liked what you heard. If you did, and we're assuming you did,
they did.
Please give us a thumbs up. Give us that like, share, subscribe, find us on social media, check out some of our old content. We appreciate the support. Well, if you guys don't have anything else to add, we can go ahead and put a bow on this one.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Congrats to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the greatest center in NBA history. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week on an all-new episode of the Tournament Podcast.